Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Hello.
It's Season 2, Episode 60. The Steelers' regular season is wrapping up. Week 17, fast approaching. It is currently Friday, December 29th. 2017 came and it's flown by, Austin. The Steelers in a position to win 13 games for the first time with Mike Tomlin, and they've already clinched a first-round bye. Not too much to be gained. There is a shot at the number 1 seed for the Steelers. They would have to win, and the Patriots would have to lose to the visiting Jets, who have Bryce Petty at quarterback, so that is not likely. We'll get into that in a little bit. But
I think they're going with the Hackenberg for that game. I think they said that they're rolling with Hackenberg.
Are they really? Can you confirm that for me?
Yep. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'll go Google it right now.
Okay, that would be good to know. Petty hasn't played too well for the Jets, but it's kind of crazy to think that a full calendar year ago, the Steelers were in a similar position playing the Browns in the final week of the season. The Browns have not won since that point. Approaching Week 17, the Browns currently sit at 0-15, and it's it would be quite a historic loss that the Steelers could hand the Browns. But kind of contrary to what recent history has suggested and what I thought the Steelers might be doing, a quote from Marcus Gilbert after practice on Thursday seemed to indicate that Ben Roethlisberger and Le'Veon Bell were going to sit out Sunday's game against the Browns. Now, they did sit out last year's finale, but last year was a little different. The Steelers were locked into the number 3 seed no matter what. A win or loss wouldn't have done anything. There's still a chance at claiming the number 1 seed with a win and a Patriots loss. Now, Austin, I know that neither you or I think the Patriots are going to lose this game. It's a big game to the Jets at home. But as the saying goes, any given Sunday, I'm a little surprised to see that the Steelers are taking this action. Now, I see why they aren't, because I guess let's go back through the whole history of the Killer Bees. What have the Steelers been missing in each postseason run the last 3 years? Well, we'll start with 2014. Le'Veon Bell got injured in the season finale, missed the playoff loss to the Ravens the following week. In 2015, the Steelers defeated the Bengals in the wildcard game. Antonio Brown got knocked out. Le'Veon Bell didn't even play in either of those 2 playoff games, having torn his MCL earlier in the year. And injured Ben Roethlisberger could not defeat the Denver Broncos in the divisional round. And then last year, Bell went down after only 6 carries in the championship game. I don't know if he would have made the difference, but it definitely would have been nice to have him in that game for longer than 6 rushing attempts. But in any case, can you confirm that Christian Hackenberg is going to be starting on Sunday?
Actually, I was wrong. He got first-team reps, which was the first time all season, and they think he's going to play at some point. Bryce Petty is supposed to be starting, but Todd Bowles said that he'll decide during the game if I want to play Christian Hackenberg or not, so he might come in later. He's not the starter, like I thought.
Okay, we'll have to keep an eye on that, but I guess circling back to the whole, should the Steelers rest their starters, I guess, what do you think about that? And I guess if you were Mike Tomlin, what would you do? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I wouldn't do what he's going to be doing, most likely.
Yeah. I have concerns with benching all the starters. I don't like that is basically accepting defeat for the number 1 seed. Sure, maybe Tomlin thinks that the Steelers could beat the Browns with backups. Steelers did in Week 17 last year when it didn't matter, but I don't know. Steelers barely edged out the Browns Week 1 this year. Winning 21-18 and putting backups in to try and win this game is a risk. I know the Patriots losing to the Jets is a long shot, but this is the NFL and that's a division game. Division games often are weird. Buccaneers nearly beat the Panthers last week, and the difference between the Bucs and the Panthers is probably bigger than the difference between the Jets and the Patriots. Let's also not forget that the Jets could have beaten New England and kept it very close the first time, but the Patriots' best friends, the refs, decided that Austin Swearinger-Jacobs fumbled the crucial decision. Had it been ruled the other way, Jets could have won that. So a small part of me believes the Jets can do it. Then the second concern is rust and momentum. I guess they're two separate concerns, but I'm putting them together. A 2-week layoff is a long time to not play football. Sure, it gets some rest, but it just sounds like way too long. Then to me, momentum is super important to me in football. Excuse my voice, by the way. I'm losing it very quickly. I'm sick. But continue on. Like I said, momentum is super important in football. It's what carried the Packers and Steelers to the playoffs last year. And losing to the Browns, even with backups in, is a momentum killer. Thus, if I could choose what is happening, I would let those starters play one quarter, and that would be the fourth quarter for several reasons. The first being the Browns would have played a full 3 quarters and would be tired, so it makes it easier on Bell and Ben, who would come in fresh. Then if they were behind, they could orchestrate a fourth quarter comeback if necessary. So that is personally what I would want. I don't want the starters to be inactive. I might want them to be sitting for most of the game, but I feel like they should get at least some football in the here before they go on a 1-week bye week. So that's personally what I want. What do you think about this?
I'm pretty much echoing your feelings here, Austin. First of all, I think we're in we just went over this a few minutes ago, but it looks like Roethlisberger, Bell, and Pouncey are the guys who are likely to be inactive for this game. It gives the Browns a better chance to win this game, and obviously that wouldn't mean so much, but it's a little different this year than it was last year. The Steelers still have a chance to win this game, and with the Patriots' loss, to get the number 1 seed. And it's important to recognize that 2 years ago, this is exactly what happened to the Patriots. They were ahead. They were leading the Broncos in the AFC playoff race. After losing to the Dolphins in the final week of the season, coupled with the Broncos win, the Patriots lost out on home field advantage. And as a result, they had to go to Denver in the AFC Championship game where they eventually lost. Should the Pats and Steelers both lose with Roethlisberger and Bell sitting out, it would be one of the most remembered and infamous gaffes in NFL history should the Steelers not win the Super Bowl. And coupled with that, you have to think it's kind of crazy that the Browns could be getting their first win of the year against the Steelers' backups. And yes, that would be, you could kind of discount it, but still, it's a win. And that would be something that would kind of just not sit well with Steelers fans, and I wouldn't imagine would sit well with the players anyways. I understand why protecting your players is important, but I think this is going a bit too far. The Steelers have had a recent history, as Austin has already talked about, where they have struggled coming off of bye weeks or extended rested periods. For guys like Bell, Brown, and Roethlisberger, that's almost 3 weeks, and in Brown's case a little more, when they play their first playoff game in a couple weeks. That's not very good. A flat start in the playoffs, usually against a good team, is going to result in a loss more often than not. If I were Mike Tomlin, I'd treat this game in a similar fashion to last week's game. Get the ball out of Roethlisberger's hands quickly, as let him and Bell start the game, limit Bell's touches, and see if you can build a comfortable lead by halftime. Don't scoreboard watch if you're the players or coaches on the field if you can avoid it. Try to let the coaches in the booth do that. And once halftime or the third quarter starts, evaluate the score of the game and the score of the Jets-Patriots game. If those scores dictate keeping your starters in, then you keep them in. But more than likely, that means the Steelers are going to start putting in their backups at that point. There's no there's no need to risk losing a shot at the number 1 seed because the Patriots should win. On the flip side, believing that your backups in the other scenario could be good enough or should be good enough to beat the winless Browns, I find that arrogant, and I don't think that that's a good enough reason for not playing the starters as well. But obviously we aren't coaches, so we don't make those decisions. As far as the injury report goes, I think it's pretty clear that Antonio Brown, who was obviously out, and Marquise Pouncey, who was questionable with a hip injury, are not going to play. I think that's pretty clear cut and dry. So the Steelers and Browns, just a quick recap of their history. They played earlier in week 1, the first game of the year actually. The Steelers won a tight one, 21-18. 2 touchdowns from Jesse James and a blocked punt by Tyler Medikevich recovered by Anthony Chickillo proved to be the difference. It was not a good game for Le'Veon Bell in his return from his holdout, only gaining 32 yards on 10 carries. And Antonio Brown had the perfect game, as you might remember, Austin, catching all 11 of his targets for 138 yards, I think it was. I can't remember. It might have been 150-something, but He had a 38-yard catch at the end of the game. That's what it was, to basically seal it for the Steelers. Do you remember how many yards he finished with in that game?
Nope, but I'm going to go find it because I can.
The Steelers lead the all-time series history 73-58, and they currently hold a 5-game winning streak. And is that right? Is 5 games right?
I thought it was longer than that, to be honest with you, but maybe.
Well, let's think about this. The Steelers lost the second game of 2014, so that means 2 games in 2015, 2 in 2016, and 1 this year. Wow. It certainly feels like longer, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess so.
And the Steelers...
Brown had 182 yards in that first game, by the way, 182.
Wow. Man, oh man. What a great year he had, too. In any case, the Steelers and Browns have played in the postseason just twice, and the Steelers have won both games. Here's a fun fact about the Browns, I guess, struggles in Pittsburgh. So the Steelers have had 2 stadiums that they've played at home since 1970. Three Rivers Stadium, which was home for them from 1970 to 2000, and Heinz Field, which was their home from 2001 to the present. The Steelers have a record of 32-6 against the Browns since they returned to the league in 1999. But at home, the Steelers have have lost to the Browns just once at Heinz Field, which was 2003. So their overall record at Heinz Field is 1-16. The Browns didn't fare too much better at Three Rivers Stadium, going a combined 5-24 at the old Steelers Stadium and losing the first 16 games played at Three Rivers Stadium between the two teams. So combining those records, the Browns have a combined record, repetitive there. The Browns' record in Pittsburgh since 1970 is 6-40. Just 6 wins, and none of them have come since 2003. So that's just something to look out for. The Browns really don't like playing in Pittsburgh. So I guess, Austin, we talked a little bit about this. Let's just kind of go over it for the rest of our audience. What we think is probably going to be the case with the inactive list. So there's 7 inactive players, and we already know that Brown and Pouncey are likely to not play. Based on what Marcus Gilbert said, you can add Le'Veon Bell and Ben Roethlisberger, so that's 4. So, Austin, I guess... what are the 2, I guess, since it'll be, we have 4 players, we have 3 left to go, who are 2 players that you think would be the most important from that point, or I guess the next 3 players that would be the most important to kind of sit on Sunday if the Steelers are going to be resting their starters?
Well, that's a lot of offense, but there needs to be one more, and I think it's usually got to be Vance McDonald. I think Vance McDonald's got to sit if they're rolling with the resting starters. He's been, so to speak, injury-prone all year, and I think he would be a great addition to have in the playoffs, so I think it would be smart to just rest him, keep him healthy. But then for the last 2, I think you need to go over to defense, and I feel like Cameron Heyward is the leader on this team. If the Steelers lost another leader like that, it would be detrimental, especially going to the playoffs. So I think you have to take him out and put either L.T. Walton in or whoever you want at that position. And then also, I think you got to go with Vince Williams. Vince Williams makes sense here. If Vince Williams goes down, I think you could count the Steelers as one and done, probably. I don't think that the Steelers defense would be able to hold anything, as they're already struggling missing Shazier, as it has been such a disadvantage having Spence there instead. And so I think you got to bench Vince Williams, especially when you have enough cornerbacks to keep Joe Hayden playing, Joe Hayden just on the sideline if you need to. And we were discussing before this that Joe Hayden actually probably needs more playing time as he just got back, so he could play for a little bit. Then Cameron Sutton or Cody Sensabaugh can take over. There's 4 healthy cornerbacks at least, and since the inactive list is going to be full of starters, Brian Allen is going to be active as well, so that has to be taken into consideration. So there will be several other cornerbacks to be that can take Hayden's spot. So he could be active but doesn't have to play much, is what I'm saying. I think you agree, right?
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. The other thing that we have kind of discussed too is that if the Steelers are in fact going this route where they're going to be resting their starters, it doesn't make any sense to not go all out with this, right?
Right.
Yeah, so if you're going to take Ben Roethlisberger and Le'Veon Bell out of the game, why would you leave Cameron Heyward in there too, I guess is kind of what we're saying. Like, I see why you might want to, but if you're preaching, basically these actions are saying we don't want our important guys to get hurt. So make sure you take out all the important guys if that's going to be the case. If you really think the Steelers' backups can beat the Browns, then just go for it, I guess. Because, again, I'm not saying Vince Williams is the best player on the Steelers' defense, but Austin and I think he should be inactive simply because an injury to Vince Williams, he's kind of as indispensable now as Ryan Shazier was a few weeks ago. You know, he's not as good of a player, obviously, but losing him means you're starting some combination of Sean Spence, a guy who has been on the team for like 3 weeks, LJ Fort, who's been a career special teamer, Tyler Matakevich, who hasn't played in a few weeks and hasn't had good reps in NFL action this year, and who else? You have to sign somebody else. You know, you don't want Arthur Moats back in there at inside linebacker, so I think Vince Williams is a guy that you need to protect, and obviously, you know, all the other players. Obviously, Bell, Brown, Pouncey, and Roethlisberger wouldn't play because you don't want to lose those guys. Heyward is the leader of that defense, and he's been the most effective defensive front player basically most of this season, if not all of the season. You know, with 12 sacks at this point, I think it makes the most sense to make sure that he's not going to get hurt in what the Steelers apparently are treating this as a meaningless game. And then last but not least there, Vince Williams. Oh, and Vance McDonald. I knew I was forgetting somebody. Yeah, he's not critical. I think the Steelers could win games without him, but it'd be really nice to have this guy play. He has been a difference maker in the limited action we've seen him in the passing game, and he's definitely been a huge boost to the running game. So having him is important, and his struggles with injuries this year has been well documented. So I want to make sure that he is resting as well. So assuming all this is the case, Austin, let's assume this is how it's going to be. Let's try to gauge how the offense is going to perform against a Cleveland Browns defensive unit that might actually be better than the statistics are going to indicate.
Yeah. Well, since facing the Steelers in week 1, I apologize. I scrolled down way too far. As we went over, all these guys are going to be active. So who is ready for the Landry-Jones, Stephen Ridley combo? We've been waiting all season to see. I know I'm beyond excited for this. This is the greatest show on earth right here. Both of these players together on the same field, the same time. It's amazing. But seriously, this game is going to be beyond the snooze fest. The only reason anyone will care to watch this game is if somehow New England is losing at any point in their game. Anyhow, as far as the preview goes, I was surprised to see that the Browns were good at anything, but they are actually the 7th-ranked rush defense. So Stephen Ridley may struggle as he didn't even look good against the Texans, but we will see. Maybe he'll surprise me, but I have this weird feeling he's going to fumble at least once in this game. As for the rest of the offense, I don't really expect any of the wide receivers to sit. Although Smith-Schuster is probably the best wide receiver we have at the moment, I expect him to play the wide receiver 1 role with Antonio Brown out. It will be hard to gauge how well he will do, as we don't really know if he and Jones have any sort of connection. But I know Jones has a connection with another wide receiver, and that's Marty B. I remember when Jones and Bryant tore apart a tough Cardinals team not too many years ago, and it was fantastic. It was a game that the Steelers were projected to lose really badly, and they won 25-12, I believe. It was a weird score, and I think that's it. But and I think Brian can have his first 100-yard game here, because I bet he will be Jones's favorite receiver. As for the other receivers, I don't expect much. Rodgers is shown to be unreliable. Justin Hunter has never been good, and Darius Heyward-Bey doesn't get many offensive snaps whatsoever, so I don't have high expectations. But again, maybe it'll be surprised like with Stephen Ridley. For the line, we really have no clue what's happening. I think we can assume Marquise Pouncey isn't playing to be cautious, but after that, I don't know if we're going to get to rest anyone. I think it would be smart to pull Gilbert, even though he had 4 games of rest. For Hubbard, as we have seen, Hubbard is comfortable there, and why not? I trust Hubbard to hold his own in that position. But I don't think they could pull anyone else, though. I'm going with the assumption that B.J. Finney will be under center with Pouncey out. But if they elect to use another lineman instead of Finney, they could rest Ramon Foster another week too if they wanted, in my opinion, because he's a veteran. Then for the tight ends, they better not play McDonald, as they said. If they want to use him in the playoffs at all, he can't play this game. He'd find a way to hurt something else. So I hope the plan is to roll with Jesse James and Grimble if they do plan on arresting other players other than the big ones. What do you have to say about the offense coming into this game?
Well, as we have been talking, this is pretty much going to be the theme of the day. We don't really know who's going to play. We have an idea, but we have already talked about who we're going to assume is going to be out. So that means that most likely Landry Jones, Stephon Ridley, and B.J. Finney are going to be replacing Ben Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, and Marquise Pouncey. Now, the Browns run a similar defensive front to the Steelers. Obviously not as effective as Pittsburgh, but this is good news for Landry Jones and B.J. Finney. I would think that by now they'll be in good shape regarding communication for this game. I have full confidence that Finney's going to be at least average. It's important to note that he's been much better at guard than at center during his NFL career. I tend to think Jones is going to be at least average as well. He'll have much better weapons around him this year as opposed to last year at receiver and tight end. The main difference here is going to be at running back. I'm not really sure what we're going to see from the former starter in Stephon Ridley. He ran hard and wasn't really effective. He had a couple nice runs, but it wasn't too great. Looking back, I thought he played better than I looked back at the stats, and, it wasn't too great of a yards per carry average. But the thing the Browns do the best, as you mentioned, Austin, is stopping the run. They really have had a solid defensive unit all year. They do rank last in points per game, but I'm willing to bet, and I'll make an argument for that's because their offense is constantly turning it over and they're usually left defending a short field. This will be challenging for the Steelers' offense to score a lot, and I expect the Browns are going to be loading up the box in an attempt to force Landry Jones to try and win this game on his own. Luckily, with Juju Smith-Schuster and Martavis Bryant, who are likely to be available, I think that we'll see a lot of them involved in this game, and I think we see a little bit more of Justin Hunter because he and Jones have probably been throwing the ball together a lot this year. But the point is that the weapons on the outside, I think, are going to be enough to get the Steelers to break through just a few times in this game. I still expect this to be a slower day than has been typical for the Steelers in the second half of the season. One key difference will be Myles Garrett and the way the Browns line him up. The Steelers did not see him in the opener, and he has been as advertised this season. But unfortunately for him, he's not going to be able to sack Ben Roethlisberger like he said he wanted to do at the NFL draft. So I suspect it'll be a tough day, but at the same point, the Steelers should have a good matchup in the secondary. So it'll all be up to Landry Jones to see if he can take advantage of it. On the other side, Austin, the Browns' offense has to be the worst in football, and it all starts with their quarterback, doesn't it?
It does. They are so bad. Since facing the Steelers in week 1, where the offense didn't actually look too terrible yet because the Steelers kind of made them look good, they've only gotten worse. Kaiser's 21 interception on the year and has been benched, but he's become a starter again because, get this, all the Browns quarterbacks are bad. It's surprise, surprise. We never would have guessed. All of them thrived on dink-and-dunk style plays and can't really make those long plays down the field or over the middle. Duke Johnson is probably their biggest strength on offense, as he has more rushing touchdowns than Isaiah Crowell on less than half the attempts. Not to say that Isaiah Crowell hasn't been pretty good this year. He actually has a better average than Duke Johnson, but Duke Johnson is a bigger red zone threat and a bigger threat in general because he also has 68 receptions this year, a career high, and 3 receiving touchdowns. He leads the team with 6 touchdowns. The next closest is the rookie tight end Njoku with 4. And he is the team's leading receiver with those 68 receptions. And I just want to give him extra respect because since Shazier's injury, on every touchdown he gets, he prays for Shazier. So he is my favorite Brown at the moment. He was also on my fantasy team, so that kind of leads an impact too. But then Josh Gordon has come back pretty big. He looks like he hasn't really lost a step. In 4 games, he has 14 receptions for 220 yards and a touchdown. Has made some nice catches already. So he could be a danger to the Steelers as well, since they didn't see him in the first matchup either. Other than those 2 and then Njoku in the red zone, there's no one really on the Browns offense that scares me. Maybe Isaiah Crowell should, because the Steelers have been terrible against the run, but frankly, I'm not. And then if they have to throw, they are in trouble. Since Kaiser is bad, and also the Steelers' pass rush has been pretty great this year, second in sacks, so I think the defense has this game handled. What do you think about the defense coming into this game against the great Browns quarterback Kaiser?
Well, I can tell you Kaiser's going to be under pressure in this game. The Steelers sacked Kaiser 7 times in week 1. I think I mentioned it on the podcast recapping that game. I forget how many times the Steelers have sacked the Browns since, I think it's the finale of the 2015 season. Do you think you could check that for me? How many sacks the Steelers have in their last 4 or 5 games against the Browns? Because they had, excuse me, do it from the season finale in 2015, because I know they had 8 in that game. They had 8 in Cleveland last year. They had 4 against Cleveland in the finale last year, and they had 7 this year, I think. Do you think you could double check that?
You want to start from 2015, you said?
Yeah, go from the finale of 2015, if you don't mind.
Okay. Nope.
Here's a fun fact about that last game last year. Who picked up his final Steelers sack against, going around Joe Thomas for his final Steelers sack in the finale last year?
I can't remember. I can't look up things and remember things at the same time. Who did it?
It was Jarvis Jones.
Oh no. He's not even on a team right now. No one even wanted him.
He did something that Steelers fans kind of hoped for his entire career, and he waited until his last. He actually had a huge game. He had a sack and a forced fumble when the Browns were driving for a game-winning touchdown in that game.
Damn. He did decently.
He did.
He did good.
Yeah. He actually, this is kind of a tangent, but he actually had a forced fumble in the Bengals playoff game a few years ago that I completely forgot about.
I didn't remember that either.
He literally, it was like a prototypical pass rushing kind of action where he goes around the left tackle and then actually not Lawrence Taylor move, but he gets his arm in there and the ball comes out. And I'm like, when did that ever happen? Is this real? But alas, the Jarvis Jones experiment did not finish well, even though he did make surprisingly a couple big plays in his career. But this is about this year's Pittsburgh Steelers, and the defense. Yeah, the Browns offense is actually kind of. I'm not going to say they're prepared for a huge day, but they have a good chance to produce in this game. And why? Why is that, you might ask? Well, the Steelers' offense is likely not producing at the rate it has been as of late, so the Browns are probably going to be in this game for a little bit longer than typically expected. That means they're going to be able to run the ball more, and the Browns ranked 27th in rushing attempts this season. But I'm willing to bet that a large reason for that is the fact that the Browns have fallen behind in a lot of their games early and have therefore abandoned the running game early. They're averaging 4.5 yards a clip on the ground as a team. That's not too bad, and they have a pair of talented running backs in Isaiah Crowell and Duke Johnson. Expect the Browns to run the ball early and often on Sunday, and the Steelers are going to have to be ready for it because the Browns simply don't have any other options this year. They've been forced to throw the ball constantly, and until Josh Gordon returned to the lineup a few weeks ago, the Browns have been banking on Duke Johnson and Seth DeValve to produce the majority of the time through the air this year. Nothing against those guys, but you'd want your receivers to be your leading receivers, and the 27 catches on the season for Ricardo Lewis is their number one wide receiver. As far as statistics go, is just pathetic. But they do have Josh Gordon back, and he's having himself a pretty nice comeback season when you consider he hasn't played in 2+ years. Now, that doesn't mean he's been lighting it up either. He had 85 yards in his first game of the year, which is more than he's had in any other game, and he's averaged less than 4 catches a game. The Steelers are still going to have to respect his ability as well, but the Browns' offense is horrible, and it all starts with their quarterback. Just as has been the case since 1999, the Browns are still looking for their quarterback. After what was a kind of promising week 1 for Kaiser, his season went down the drain. As you mentioned, 21 interceptions to just 9 touchdowns. It's more than double his touchdowns. He is athletic and can make some nice plays in the running game, but he's really struggled with accuracy and holding on to the ball this year. The Steelers, who are 6 sacks away from the team record, should be able to bring him down and force some turnovers. So, speaking of sacks, the Steelers, as I just said, is 6 sacks away from the team record. I think it's 55. And as I had just mentioned beforehand, Austin, they've had a bunch of sacks against the Browns the last few matchups. So, they've played each other 4 times in the last 4 games. How many sacks did the Steelers have against them?
They had 26 sacks. That is ridiculous. Ridiculous. That's awful. How does that happen? They're averaging almost 7 sacks a game. Math, just between 6 and 7 sacks a game in the past 4 games. That's insane.
And that was with the disappointing 4 sacks in the finale last year. Come on, guys, you got to do better than that.
Yeah.
Only 4
Not
sacks.
enough.
Yeah. I wanted 3 from Jarvis Jones. He didn't do it. Not happy with it. But in any case, you can bet the Steelers' defense is going to be fired up. But I'd be disappointed if they don't force 2 Kaiser turnovers. The Steelers may struggle to stop the run in this game, which is going to be key, especially if Vince Williams is sitting. But the simple ineptitude of Deshaun Kaiser in the Browns' passing game leaves me feeling that the Steelers shouldn't really have a problem keeping the Browns to under 20 points in this game. But at the same time, if the Browns can manage to protect the ball, I think they'll be able to stay in this game. So it'll be all about that running game for sure. As far as the special teams go, Austin, as is always the case, it's pretty simple, but they do have a pretty good punter in Britton Colquitt. His ratio for punts inside the 20 to touchbacks is 23-2, so that's pretty nice, and he's averaging 48.1 yards per punt. That's pretty good. And they have an above-average kick returner, Matthew Days, who's averaging over 24 yards of return. But their kicker is Zane Gonzalez, or is it Zane? I believe it's Zane Gonzalez.
I think it's Zane.
Yeah, my apologies. I believe I had a typo there. Zane Gonzalez has been inconsistent, just converting less than 3/4 of his kicks this year at 73.7%. To be fair, he's only attempted 19 kicks on the year, which should give you an idea of how bad the Browns' offense has been here. Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just want to add that Barry has sort of picked it up in recent weeks, coming from 30th in net average down to 22. So that's good to see. But I also want to mention that's not just on Barry. Net average is actually a stat used to also kind of see how your coverage team is doing. So coverage team also picked it up based on the stats as well, because his average alone is still pretty low. He ranks 25th, but that's also an improvement. So I just wanted to mention that he has improved from 30th. He's gotten a bit better.
I think that the net yards per punt is actually probably more reflective of how good the special teams unit is. So that's something we could look into at this offseason, I guess. As far as keys to the game, Austin, I guess what would a key be on offense when you don't have these guys playing? Because obviously that would be a key if they were playing to not get injured. But I guess when you have Landry Jones at quarterback, what's the key here?
It's to not turn over the ball. The Browns' offense isn't that good, so the only way they will really thrive is the Steelers shoot themselves in the foot and allow the defense to get them into Steelers territory first. So, what's it called? Landry. I couldn't think of his name for a second. Landry Jones has to make smart throws. He has to throw it away when it really looks bad, even if it's third down. Sometimes just punting is the better option. It usually always is, actually, but regardless. That's my key on offense. What's your key on offense?
Get out to a fast start. Score a couple of early touchdowns if possible. Last week, the Steelers went up 10 and 17-0 last week. And I think everyone knew that game was effectively over at that point. Put pressure on the Browns' offense, and getting up by 10 to 17 points is probably going to be enough by halftime. On the other side, Austin, my key is to not give up the big play. Make the Browns drive the length of the field, and they have by far more turnovers than the rest of the league. If the Steelers can force the Browns to run 8 to 10 play drives, the chances that Kaiser is going to be throwing an interception or turning the ball over or another mistake for the Browns happens, that just increases. And as long as you don't give up those big, easy gains, the defense should have a pretty easy day just keying in on the running game. What's your defensive key?
Mine is to lock up Isaiah Crowell and or force him to pass. The Browns are significantly worse at passing, so we want to make Kaiser throw it as much as possible. So that's my case. So
right.
Moving straight along to X Factors, who are your X Factors on offense and defense?
I have just one X factor on offense, and it's the quarterback. Pretty rare that we have this, but it's not often your backup quarterback plays. It's been a long time, Austin, since Landry Jones played a meaningful game for the Steelers. Now, yes, last year was meaningful for himself as he was going to be a free agent, and he played relatively well, but he hasn't played an important game for the team since that Cardinals game you were talking. Or no, you know what? I think the Raiders game later that year was, or the Raiders game was later that year, so that was also an important game. But the point is that he hasn't played an important snap really in a long time. So I'll be interested to see how he plays, and we'll see if he can quarterback the Steelers to a win. And even if the Steelers don't end up with the number 1 seed, a win is still important here because, you never know if what will happen in the playoffs if Ben Roethlisberger goes down and Jones may have to play a drive or something. It's nice knowing that you have somebody that can at least play. On the other side, Austin, I'm going to go with Sean Spence as my defensive X factor. The Steelers' rush defense has been lackluster the last few weeks, and a lot of it has been on Sean Spence. Last week, the Steelers were gashed right up the middle repeatedly, and Spence was a big reason for that, and he's got to get off blocks and has to react a little faster. I don't want to be too hard on him because he hasn't played a lot this year, but he's got to be better. Can't let the Browns run the ball in this game. So who are your X factors, Austin?
On offense, my favorite's Brian. I expect a lot of playing time from him, and I know he's one of the Steelers that has played well with Jones in the past. So I expect him to be the difference maker in this one in a big way. On defense, I kind of cheated and took 2. I'm making it the safeties. The Steelers have been gashed up the middle on runs since Shazier's been gone, and the linebackers need so much help. So I'm making the safeties my X factor because if they could come down and stop the run once they recognize it, they will be difference makers in this one.
All right, so it's week 17 in the NFL season, Austin. We did most of the work here on the AFC playoff picture, but we'll just run down through the list for you. The Patriots are not locked into the number 1 seed. They have a first-round bye clinch, but they need a win or a Steelers loss or a tie for themselves. Or a Patriots and Steelers tie to clinch home field advantage. The Steelers have a first-round bye clinched as the number 2 seed right now. They need a win or tie versus the Browns and a Patriots loss against the Jets for the number 1 seed. The Jaguars and Chiefs are locked into the number 3 and 4 seeds respectively. The Ravens are currently the number 5 seed in the AFC. They can clinch the 5th seed with a win or tie versus the Bengals, or a Bills loss or tie, or a Titans loss or tie. They can clinch the 6th seed with a loss as long as either the Titans or Bills lose their respective games. The Titans are currently the 6th seed. They clinch simply by winning versus the Jaguars, and a Ravens loss versus the Bengals, or they can clinch, that was the 5th seed. They can clinch the 6th seed simply by winning, or they could get a tie versus the Jaguars and the Bills lose or tie, and the Chargers lose or tie. And then last but not least, the Bills and Chargers both lose. The Chargers, who are the first team out looking in, would need to win and have the Titans lose or tie, and either the Bills lose or tie or the Ravens win or tie. And then last but not least, they would need to tie against the Raiders, and the Titans would need to lose, and the Bills would need to lose or tie. As far as the NFC playoff picture goes, the Eagles are currently the number 1 seed. The Vikings are the number 2 seed. The Rams are the number 3 seed. The Saints are the number 4. The Panthers are 5. The Falcons are 6, and the Seahawks are 7th. So let's move into the pick'em section. Austin, could you start with the Packers and Lions game? The Lions are 6.5-point favorites.
I have the Lions covering. Packers are without Aaron Rodgers are just trashy. They're like a 7-9 team. So Lions cover. What do you have?
I have the Lions covering here. This is a pretty unimportant game for both teams, but I think the Packers are pretty much defeated here. The Lions are going to want to play a little better and potentially save Jim Caldwell's job as they put an exclamation point on what has been a frustrating season for them, that once again they came so close. The Texans and Colts, 2 battered teams, a difficult game. It looks like DeAndre Hopkins is going to sit this one out. Had that not been the case, I'd probably take the Texans, but at the same point, you're looking at TJ Yates and Taylor Heineke at quarterback, and Jacoby Brissett is more accomplished than either of those, or I guess better than either of those. So I'll take the Colts with the 5-point spread to cover here.
Who do the Texans have besides DeAndre Hopkins? As soon as I saw DeAndre Hopkins, I think I would take the Browns to beat the Texans. I would definitely take the Bears to beat the Texans without DeAndre Hopkins. I would take
the Giants?
Basically any team. I think the Texans without DeAndre Hopkins are the worst team in the league, straight out. At the moment, I'm sorry. If they were healthy, they would be decent. But without DeAndre Hopkins, that's the worst team in the league. Colts cover.
They can't wait for this season to end. They have a ton of injuries.
Yep.
Bears at Vikings. The Vikings are getting 11.5 at home. This seemed like a lot to me for a team that has locked in at the number 2 seed, I believe. They are locked in at the number 2, right?
I believe so.
But the Bears are on the road. I feel like the Vikings are they're a really deep team. They're going to win this game by a lot. So I'll take them to cover here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm taking the Vikings cover as well. I froze up for a second. I was looking at the playoff picture. Yeah, Vikings cover easily. The Browns. Bears are bad.
The New York Jets at the New England Patriots. The Pats are getting 15 points. I'm not saying the Jets have no chance, but I think there's a very little chance. It'd be a lot different if they had Josh McCown at quarterback, but it looks like it's going to be the two-headed monster of Bryce Petty and Christian Hackenberg. The Jets, it's a large spread, so I'll take the Jets plus 15 because I think the Patriots are going to eventually rest some starters when this game gets late. But, the Patriots are going to win this game, so I'll take the Jets plus 15 here. What about you, Austin?
Over 2 touchdowns is just too much for me. I have the Jets plus 15. If it was just 1 point less, I think I would have taken the Pats to cover, but just over 2 touchdowns is a little too much for me, so Jets plus 15.
All righty. Redskins at Giants, a pair of teams. Both of their seasons are effectively over. The Skins are getting 3 points on the road against the G-Men. Could be Eli Manning's final game as a New York Giant. I think they'll play inspired, but I don't think it's going to be enough. They're another team that's had bad injury luck, and they're not very good. So I'll take the Redskins to cover in this one as well.
Yeah, I'm picking the Redskins to cover. Their whole locker room is a mess. I don't think we talked about it, but Eli Apple, the quarterback that was drafted in the same class as Artie Burns, my favorite for the class, is suspended for the last game. And Landon Collins on a radio show, I forget which one, called him a cancer to the team. So they're not doing good. And I looking back now, I'm very glad that the Giants took him. I wanted him at first, but he's been bad, and he's been bad for the locker room. I mean, the whole locker room is a mess, but he can't handle criticism. He's still a child, from what I heard. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. That is something we forgot to talk about. The Dallas Cowboys visiting the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles have racked up home field advantage, but I'm actually kind of surprised here. The Cowboys are getting 2.5 points on the road. I feel like it should be the other way around, so I'm taking the Eagles to win outright.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. The Eagles win outright. The Cowboys are just ineffective. They're not that good this year in total, even with Zeke back. They couldn't beat the Seahawks, who were injury-ridden on defense, so I'm going to pick the Eagles to win outright, even with Nick Foles. It's not a big point spread anyway.
I kind of feel like the Cowboys of the last 2 years are better than what we've seen this year, and yet worse than what they were last year. I feel like there's some sort of middle ground for them.
Yeah, something like that.
Panthers at Falcons. This is a really important game in the NFC playoff picture. The Panthers can still win the NFC South, and the Falcons need to win. Well, not need to, but they really are probably going to have to win in order to make it to the playoffs. The Falcons are getting 3.5 points at home, but this is going to be a tight one. I think the Panthers are plus 3.5. I think the Falcons do just enough at home to pull out the win, but it's going to be a close one.
This is important to see. This is important for the Seahawks. The Seahawks need the Panthers to win here, so otherwise they don't make the playoffs. So I have the Panthers winning outright. I think they're the better team. Anyway, honestly, it's going to be close, though. The Falcons are going to be playing their heart out because they know if they lose, they're going to be having to hope, because they could still make it if they lose. if the Cardinals upset the Seahawks later, they'd still make it. But obviously, they want to put their own destiny in their hands, not someone else's. So, but I have Panthers winning outright.
The Kansas City Chiefs are essentially playing a meaningless game. They're in Denver. The Denver Broncos are 3.5-point favorites. They can't wait for their season to end either. Patrick Mahomes, the first-round draft pick, is going to be making his first career start. The Chiefs will be sitting a lot of their starters. Even that being the case, I think the Broncos are just they've packed it in for the rest of the season, and they're looking ahead to 2018. The Chiefs are going to win this game, I believe. So I'll take the Chiefs to win outright this week.
I'm taking the Chiefs to win outright as well. Broncos are just awful. Broncos are worse than I thought. They're about to go into a huge rebuilding phase. They need tons of help on offense. Their defense is good, but they're going to be in trouble for a very long time as they have to rebuild several parts of their offense. That offensive line needs help. They need to find a franchise quarterback. Demaryius Thomas is basically getting older, and Emmanuel Sanders isn't really doing much, but that could be because of the quarterback situation here. And they also kind of need a tight end. It's just that whole offense needs revamping. And they might also fire head coach Vance Joseph. We don't know. They really are about to be in for a long rebuilding time, I think. So, but back to the discussion at hand. Chiefs win outright in this game. The Broncos are bad.
I forget. I think it was. I saw something on Twitter this year. The last time the Chiefs had a quarterback that they drafted that won a game was like 1983. Did you see that?
Really? No, I didn't.
I don't confirm this with me, but check David Todd on Twitter, Austin, if you can for a moment. Patrick Mahomes, it's kind of an interesting storyline. Everyone was thinking at some point the Chiefs were going to be kind of a rebuilding team. Mahomes was going to get his shot later in the year. And all of a sudden, Alex Smith goes on a Pro Bowl level tear early on in the year. The Chiefs struggle midseason, but he kind of rights the ship. And he has probably one of his best career seasons ever, Alex Smith does. So we don't see Mahomes at all until right now. And I'll be interested to see just how good he is. It might determine kind of what happens for the future of this franchise going forward. But let me know, I guess just see if you can give me a heads up if you have or when you do find that information. The Jaguars are at the Titans. This would have been an interesting clash had the Titans not completely fallen off a cliff. The Titans are getting 3 points at home. They need to win this game to make it to the playoffs. But the Jaguars at the number 3 seed, locked in there, have actually, Doug Marrone stated that he intends for his starters to play in this game and play the whole game. I was kind of surprised at that, but after their really poor performance last week against the 49ers, I can kind of see why he'd want them to play. But I think the Jaguars are going to play, and they're going to play angry, and the Titans just have no chance. So I'll take the Jaguars to win outright in what I think is going to be a blowout.
I think the Rams are going to.
The Jaguars, not the Rams.
I'm sorry. I looked at the highlight and I got confused because I was switching back to the page. I have the Jaguars winning outright here. Since they're playing all the starters, I like Doug Marrone as a coach. I like his I don't know what to call it. His just strictness.
Demeanor?
I like that he's keeping this team, trying to keep it professional. Like they're winning. This is the first time winning in a while. He's trying to keep them really on track. So I like him as a coach. So Jaguars went outright in blowout fashion, just like you said. I can't find the tweet, by the way. I've gone back 4 days and scrolled back up. So
maybe
I can't find it.
That's fair. I was just that was just something I was curious about. The line I have on ESPN here has the 49ers at 3.5-point favorites over the Los Angeles Rams in LA. A game where the Rams head coach Sean McVay said Todd Gurley is definitely not going to play and their starters likely aren't going to play. That plus the rising legend of Jimmy Garoppolo gives me the reason to basically pick the 49ers to cover here, and his legend continues as the Niners storm towards dark horse playoff berth next year. What about you?
For this game, I'm going to pick the Rams to win out right here. I find it interesting that they are going to bench their players. I feel that's basically saying that they would rather go into. I mean, it's not necessarily that they lose, but because I still have them winning, but that's saying that they'd rather go into Carolina and not go into Carolina. They'd rather face Carolina than to face Seattle. I would rather face. Oh, actually, I mean, that's a hard one.
Here's why. I think they might be trying to set up a game against Philadelphia, going into Philadelphia and taking on Nick Foles rather than going into Minnesota. That might be what they're trying to do.
But didn't they wipe Minnesota earlier? Didn't the Rams?
No.
Or was it the opposite?
No.
Was it the Minnesota Vikings that wiped the Rams?
That's what it was, and the Rams beat the Saints. That's what it was.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Huh. I had no idea. Oh, no. They had Rams vs. Vikings happened this year, too, and the Vikings wiped the floor with the Rams. You're right. They probably want to avoid the Vikings then because they lost 24-7.
Yeah,
okay, that makes sense.
That was a tough game for them.
Rams winning out right here.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be an interesting game to watch. Also interesting to note that the top 3 leading rushers in the NFL are all likely not going to play, and they're within, I think, 13 yards of each other. Todd Gurley, Kareem Hunt, and Le'Veon Bell all might not play. The Buffalo Bills are visiting the Miami Dolphins. The Bills, coming off a disappointing loss to the Patriots, still have a chance to make the playoffs for the first time since 1999. They're getting 2.5 on the road. This seems like a tough game for me, for the Bills. I think they'll squeeze out a 3-point win, but the Dolphins, I just feel like they're going to give the Bills a tough time in Miami.
I agree with that statement. I was really thinking the Dolphins win outright because I feel like it'd be the Bills' things to do to just lose here and to get rid of any playoff hopes. So, but I still have the Bills covering. I think they're just going to edge it out by the 3 points, like you said. I'm going to agree with that, and Bills cover. Another
game that I think you and I have similar thoughts on, the Oakland Raiders playing their final game. Wait, is this the year they moved to Las Vegas, or is it next year?
They moved to Vegas in 2019 when the stadium is done being built.
Okay, so next year is their last year in Oakland. For this year, they're going to LA to face the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are getting 7 points at home. I don't know, Austin. This is a tough one. The Raiders have been vastly disappointing this year, but it feels like the Raiders always have the Chargers' number, and even if they don't win, it's a lot closer. I'll tell you what, I feel like every time the Raiders and Chargers play, the Raiders block a punt.
I feel like that might be true. When I think about it, that kind of sounds like familiar. It feels like something that happened.
So that being the case, I'm going to take the Raiders +7 because I think the Chargers are a better team and they're the team that needs to win. So I'll take the Chargers to win, but I think this is going to be a pretty close game. And the Raiders are going to end a frustrating season with another frustrating loss.
Yeah, before the game earlier this year, the Raiders were on a 4-game win streak against the Chargers. They lost earlier this year 17-16, and that was at home. The reason I'm picking the Raiders +7. I almost picked the Raiders to win because I feel like it's the Chargers thing to blow games, especially in the fourth quarter. So it was hard for me not to pick the Raiders to win outright, but I have Raiders +7.
Old habits do die hard, as we have seen plenty of times before. The Arizona Cardinals at the Seattle Seahawks. This is one of the most interesting games of the week for me, Austin. It wasn't on my radar at the start of the week, but the Seahawks, who are getting 9 points at home, had this game. If this game were being played in Arizona, I was going to pick the Cardinals to win outright. The Cardinals are just a scrappy team, and they play hard, even with all the injuries. They're a good football team. It could be Larry Fitzgerald's last game. I could see him torching the Seahawks one more time, kind of his swan song performance. I could see that happening, but I think the Seahawks are too proven a team that knows what's in front of them, a game that they know they have to win. So I think they'll get it done in this game, but it's going to be a lot closer than this line is suggesting.
I'm actually going to take the Seahawks to cover. I think they're going to play their hearts out to try and secure that last seed. I mean, when does this game start? Is this a 1 p.m. game? I didn't write it down.
We're all at the 4 o'clock games now. There's a ton of 4 o'clock. I think
That's harder.
Oh,
this is so hard. Because if the Panthers didn't win, I could see the Cardinals just... well, I'm going to go with that. I predicted the Panthers to win. So the Seahawks are going to play their hearts out. And the Seahawks are going to cover. That's my prediction.
Actually, as a matter of fact, Austin, there are more games on at 4 o'clock this week than there are at 1. If you have the playoff machine open, the Steelers and Browns is the last one at 1.
Oh, really? Oh, that's helpful.
So there's going to be a ton of these games at 4 o'clock. There's going to be a lot happen. I've never been so excited for 4 o'clock football. It's going to be like 1 o'clock all over again.
Oh, boy.
I don't believe I said this, but I'll take the Cardinals +9. I think I implied it, but I wanted to say it for the record. Saints at Buccaneers. The Saints are getting 6.5 on the road. This seems like another close game, but I think the Saints are just a better team, and I think Jameis Winston and the Bucs are packing it in. So I'll take the Saints to cover.
I'm picking the Saints to cover as well. I'm going to mirror you there. I think that the Saints would probably want to lose because they want to go back to Carolina where they've won twice already this year. And I think, maybe third time's a charm for Carolina, but I think I'd rather first Carolina than Seattle or the Falcons if the Falcons make it. So I have the Saints covering here.
Last game of the week before we get to the Steelers game again, the Bengals at the Ravens. The Ravens are more than likely going to the playoffs, I think. Joe Flacco seems to have finally turned it on. And the Bengals, this could be Marvin Lewis's last game. I think it's going to be a spirited battle, but I think the Bengals are not going to have enough in the tank to beat the Ravens. So I'll take the Bengals +9.5, but the Ravens will get the upper hand here.
The Bengals, spoiler to the Lions season last week, I think they're going to keep it close but not win. Bengals +9.5.
All right. So Austin and I decided to do something a little fun this year. The ESPN playoff machine, something that's always fun for hypotheticals. Week 17, so it's the easiest week to do it. We kind of predicted each of the games just now, and we basically ran it through the ESPN playoff machine simulator. So it spat out this for us. So I'll start with mine, Austin. The AFC, based on my predictions, I have the Patriots and Steelers at the top 2 seeds, with the Patriots having home field. The Jaguars and Chiefs obviously at the 3 and 4 seeds, and the Ravens and Chargers holding the 5 and 6 seeds. So that means on Wild Card weekend it would be Jacksonville hosting the Chargers and Kansas City hosting Baltimore for the other game. On the NFC side, I'd have the Eagles and Vikings in their top 2 seeds as they're already locked into. I have the Saints as the number 3 seed and the Rams as the 4. The Panthers at 5 and the Falcons at 6. So that would make a matchup between the Saints and Falcons on Wild Card weekend, and another one between the Rams and Panthers. What did you have for your playoff field, if you will?
I actually mirrored you for the AFC. I have the Patriots on top with the Steelers at 2nd. Then I have the Jaguars at 3 and the Chiefs at the 4th seed, the Ravens at 5th, and the Chargers at 6th. And just to mirror what you said, that would mean that the Jaguars would face the Chiefs at Jacksonville, and then Chiefs would face Ravens in Chiefs' home field at Arrowhead. For NFC, I'm actually different. I have it the same up top, Eagles and Vikings, since they don't move. Then I have Rams at 3, the Saints at the 4th seed, the Panthers at the 5th seed, and the Seahawks at the 6th seed, which would mean that for me, the Rams would verse the Seahawks at the Rams Stadium, and the Saints would verse the Panthers at Mercedes-Benz Superdome. So that's what it looked like for me. We just had differences in the seeding for Saints and Rams, and then also Falcons didn't make it for me, and Seahawks made it instead.
Okay. We're also planning on having a playoff preview episode. I'm sure we'll work out the details for that soon. But first and foremost, the Steelers have one more game against the Browns this week. The 8th time in the last 10 years the Steelers will have finished their regular season against the Browns. We'll get right into bold predictions, Austin. I think the Steelers force 3 turnovers in this game, all of them being responsible, all of them being the fault of Deshaun Kaiser, who loses a fumble and throws 2 picks. And just for the sake of completing it, I'll say that Sean Spence records his first career interception and Mike Mitchell gets his first pick of the year. Arthur Moats has a forced and recovered fumble in this game as well. I think Landry Jones has a pretty good day. He throws two touchdowns and no picks. His touchdowns going to the tall receivers, Martavis Bryant and Justin Hunter. And last but not least, Stephon Ridley. Not really a bold prediction per se, but he finishes with 75 yards on the ground and his first Steelers touchdown. So what are your bold predictions for this Sunday's game?
I'm going to mirror you with the Stephen Ridley prediction. I think he gets 100 rushing yards on a really good rushing defense here against the Browns. Then my second bold prediction is that the defense goes absolutely nuts in this game, getting 6 sacks, 3 interceptions, and a safety. 2 of those interceptions are going to go to Joe Hayden, and one's going to be a pick 6. And then a third bold prediction is that Landry Jones doesn't disappoint me. He gets 250 yards and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions.
Ooh. Are you going to make a fourth one? Here. Let me pitch this to you. Joshua Dobbs plays.
No, I'm not going to make that bold prediction. He might, but I'm not going to do that.
Oh, man. Okay. We could actually be talking about his first NFL playing time after Sunday. We'll see how that goes. But for now, the Steelers are 6-point favorites at home in their season finale. Kind of crazy. The 2017 season is about to wrap up. 32 teams entered the field. 24 teams are about to have their season end. My math is wrong, isn't it?
I didn't hear it, to be honest, so I don't know.
Oh, yeah, no, it's not 24. It's 20. 20 teams are about to have their season end. I don't know why I thought that. Because there will be 12 teams remaining following this week. So I'll pick the Steelers to cover here by winning 24-13. Look, the Browns have a good chance to produce on offense, but I just don't think it's going to be enough. I think Kaiser's going to throw too many interceptions, and the Steelers' offense is going to do just enough to pull out the win. The Browns become the second team in NFL history to finish 0-16.
That's incredible. That'd be I can't wait for their parade if that happens, but I have the Steelers winning 30-17. 4 touchdowns and a safety on that 30 points. Obviously, one being the pick 6. I made sure to account for it this time. Last time I made a bold prediction, and I didn't really count it into my score. I got it this time. Steelers cover therefore since they won 30-17. And bang, that's it.
Hugh Jackson set to jump into Lake Erie sometime in the next couple weeks. So we'll see how that goes.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say this quickly because as soon as I went on Twitter, there was NFL news. Devontae Adams, let me see if I can find it really quick.
Oh, the 4-year, $15 million deal.
A contract extension, a big one too. It was Devontae Adams' new 4-year deal with the Packers. Deal is worth $58.75 million, including $18 million signing bonus, and includes $32 million in the first 2 years. That happened literally an hour ago. I just wanted to say that there's NFL news.
I remember seeing that tidbit on my phone here a few seconds ago, and then I kind of forgot to mention it. Also on NFL.com, the Buccaneers are reportedly keeping coach Dirk Koetter. Is that how you say his name?
I think you say it that way, Dirk Koetter. Yep.
For next year. And then just some other news about James Harrison. He came out with a quote today, or I guess a long response. I don't know if you saw it, Austin. He essentially said he didn't sign up to sit on the bench. And he said, he basically said Bud Dupree was wrong. He said, ask TJ Watt, if I've taught him anything, I think was basically what he said, right?
Yeah, amongst other things, yes.
Yeah, so clearly the divorce here between the Steelers and James Harrison is not, it's not going to be getting better right away, but, we're really done talking about that. It's on to Cleveland, and hopefully the Steelers come out of it with the best record they've ever had under Mike Tomlin, tied for the 3rd best record the Steelers have ever had. Austin, if you're all set, I think we're all set to wrap this thing up for the last time in the Steelers regular season of 2017.
We good.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions about the show or any questions about the Steelers you want to ask us, email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check us out on Twitter @stronger_steel, Instagram @stronger_steel_NFL, and Facebook @StrongerThanSteelPodcast. We post our episodes on SoundCloud and YouTube under the name Stronger Than Steel Podcast. And we have a website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. So, ladies and gentlemen, please get a chance to check that out. We're moving towards the end of our first full season, Season 2. We started all the way back at the end of the Steelers season last year. Last year, the 2016 season, we picked up kind of midway through the season, kind of went through the end. But this is our first full year in action. It's been a lot of fun. Steelers in position to win their 7th Super Bowl just like they were last year. It's an exciting time to be a Steelers fan in Austin. Even if the Steelers don't end up with the number 1 seed, I'll be looking forward to watching Sunday's game. And the Steelers say they won't be scoreboard watching, but I will be.
Oh, I will be too, with no doubt. I mean, I think they lie when they say that. I think they're going to be scoreboard watching.
At least for the first half, depending on how competitive that game is. But in any case, Austin, thank you again for joining me. And Steeler Nation, you have a terrific day. And I guess I don't know when we'll podcast again. It might be 2018 by the time we do. So in case we don't, have a happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.